You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
And I remember when I was sort of design agency side, this was just prior to Seedlip, and someone told me that nothing's original and that basically everything is a combination of lots of thoughts or ideas that have come before. And so how do you get good ideas? Well, you get good ideas by exposing yourself to different experiences and different people than your competition. Plain and simple. And I've grabbed hold of that, and it's really stuck with me, I guess, over the years of building Seedlip or coming up with new drinks projects.
Welcome back to Business of Drinks, where we dive into strategies that are reshaping the beverage industry. I'm Scott Rosenbaum.
And I'm Erica Ducey. Today, we're speaking with one of the true category creators in beverage, Ben Branson. He's the founder of Seedlip, the world's first distilled non-alcoholic spirit. You know, this is a brand that was so disruptive that it went from launch to acquisition by Diageo in a remarkably quick timeline, just 5 years after its launch.
It was an absolutely stunning trajectory to witness. Even before its acquisition, Seedlip was producing some 30,000 bottles per month, selling at an unheard premium price point of more than $30 a bottle, and had landed in around 300 Michelin star restaurants. Amazing for a non-alcoholic adult beverage. And for Diageo, it was a signal that non-alc wasn't just a trend. What Seedlip had created was really a strategic growth pillar for a multinational to invest in. And it was a smart bet. The non-alc category that Ben pioneered is now worth more than $11 billion, according to IWSR estimates.
Yeah, and now Ben is back and he's building again. His latest company, Pollen Projects, is behind two innovative product lines. The first is Seasn, which is a line of non-alcoholic cocktail bitters, and the second is called Sylva. It's the world's first non-alcoholic distillery and maturation lab focused exclusively on dark sipping spirits crafted from trees. Yes, that is non-alcoholic spirits. And yes, you heard that right, from trees.
It is a tremendous amount to wrap one's head around. Even the production techniques that they're using at Sylva are uncommon. We're talking sonic maturation, vacuum distillation, gravity percolation. They are even using olive wood and paduk wood from West Africa as flavor drivers. They're not just making your typical non-alc alternatives, they are inventing a whole new class of liquids.
Yes, and that brings us to why this conversation is a little different than most of our interviews. So I was really interested in getting inside Ben's mind. I really wanted to understand how he thinks about products and about the creative process. And some of his answers really surprised me. There are some twists and turns in here that will probably be surprising to most listeners. But crucially, a framework around his thinking, around his brilliance, it did emerge. So for any drinks entrepreneurs who are listening, here were my 3 big takeaways. First, Ben shares how he used data to validate white space in the market. So he methodically cold called 500 top bars in the UK, and he found that none of them had credible non-alcoholic offerings. This was before the product launched in 2015. And you know, a lot of people might have thought it was a roadblock, but he saw the white space. And second, he discusses how Seedlip was scaled with a top-down strategy targeting just 1,000 tastemakers globally. So this was an interesting strategy that helped him secure champions within the trade who really helped spread the brand message far and wide. And third, he offers advice on the factors required to build category defining products, including a relentless focus and obsessiveness on making the top quality liquid.
Yeah, Ben is very frank in his discussion. He doesn't shy away from hard topics to discuss. You know, the conversation covers some of his biggest mistakes, labeling issues, fulfillment breakdowns, and, how he can really build a culture around accountability versus blame. And it works.
Yeah, definitely. Ben also shares a key mental model for innovation, which is nothing is original, everything is a remix. So, the thinking there is that the broader your curiosity, the more new combinations you can unlock. And that's how he's thinking about trees. So, there are over 73,000 tree species globally that he may quite literally tap as potential products, which you'll hear about. And as Ben says, Sylva is just getting started.
So, if you are a budding visionary in the drinks industry, whether we're talking non alc spirits or something entirely new, this is one of those conversations that's going to stretch your thinking in new directions.
Here's our conversation with Ben Branson. And now, a word from our sponsor. Is your drinks brand looking to start or expand import and distribution?
Whether you're seeking to enter new markets or you're unhappy with a current distributor and desiring a better fit, you should know about Swig Partners.
Founded by industry experts Eric Siegelbaum and Amy Troutmiller, Swig takes the guesswork and the legwork out of distribution strategy. Swig helps brands and distributors find the right fit for long-term relationships and sales success.
US-based importers and distributors should reach out too. With Swig, they can explore new products for free. And brands, you can get $100 off by mentioning Business of Drinks. Find out more at swigpartners.com/business of drinks. That's swigpartners.com/business of drinks.
Ben, thanks so much for coming on the Business of Drinks.
Thanks, Erica, for having me.
So let's hop into it. Tell me about your background.
Good place to start. So I'm from a farming family. That's important to note. We've been farming 320 years up in Lincolnshire, north of England, still farming today. And I just took two things really from that. One, I spent a lot of time outside in nature, a lot of time in fields, and a lot of time understanding where our potatoes came from and that very simplistic provenance. And that, tree houses and dens and shooting rabbits and all that kind of good outdoor, English countryside, rural life. I also took just watching my family and people around me hard work. So farming's hard work. And I saw hard work around me a lot. And then my dad is not a farmer, but he'd set up his own business as well. And so I was also kind of seeing lots of people in my family, I guess, doing their own thing. And lots of sort of, I don't know, you particularly say entrepreneurs, but lots of people basically with their own businesses and working for themselves. And I guess that is really for want of a better phrase, sowed a seed
Totally. I mean, I think it's really interesting because I was reading up on your background and learned that you went through this period as a young person of acquiring new skills. And I was just struck by kind of your sort of fearlessness. You went and lived in Thailand and were a flame eater and doing flame dances. And then you lived in Botswana and were teaching children and lived in India in an ashram. And, it struck me that there's this sort of, real fearlessness or sort of, I don't know what to call it other than like this entrepreneurial spirit. Like you didn't have fear of going out and trying new things. And I'm curious how that led you, from these international experiences trying new things back to England, where you essentially create a non-alcoholic spirits category from scratch. This didn't exist prior to Seedlip's launch in 2015. So, what was that part of the journey like?
Yeah, I think I am. My mother my grandfather told my mother, "You'll never raise that boy." And I think I was only about 4 or 5 when that happened. And all my mother says about my childhood is that she was taking me in and out of A&E all the time. And so I am a risk taker. I think when I've applied that to business, I've sort of I'm a calculated risk taker, I think, when I apply that to business. And so I do my homework and I want to really think things through, not for too long, but I do want to do my diligence in that aspect. And I'm very curious. So I want to understand things and I want to take them apart and I want to see how you put them back together again. I have met lots and lots of different people around the world and had lots and lots of different experiences. And I remember when I was sort of design agency side, this was just prior to Seedlip, and someone told me that nothing's original and that basically everything is a combination of lots of thoughts or ideas that have come before. And so how do you get good ideas? Well, you get good ideas by exposing yourself to different experiences and different people than your competition, plain and simple. And I've grabbed hold of that, and it's really stuck with me, I guess, over the years of building Seedlip or coming up with new drinks projects, which I'm sure we'll talk about. That literally nothing's actually new. It's just a combination of lots of other things. And so if you expose yourself to whether that be international travel or whether that be random niche interests, which I have many of, those things will join at some point. You will get better ideas because you will be able to put those things together in different ways and come out with different solutions. So yeah, I've had a very varied and colorful background. And actually, I guess my life was quite straightforward up until 18 and fairly single-minded, a lot of that driven by being in school. And then it opened and it went very wide and very chaotic and lots of risk taking and lots of different experiences. And then actually all it's done, I guess, with Seedlip, so back to sort of 2015, is become very narrow and incredibly single-minded and focused again. And so, yeah, I feel like I'm able now to be very direct and very, very, very ruthlessly focused in what I need to do, work and personal life.
Yeah. And so what was that spark really? So, I had listened to something talking about, you at some point you get fascinated with the 47,000 different edible plants out there and you look back in, medieval history and you're finding these tomes about these botanical spirit and non-alcoholic spirits that people would make, hundreds of years ago. And what prompted you to bring that to life and think, hey, this might be something we could productize?
I remember walking into my local supermarket, and I'm sure it's the same in the US. There's some fresh herbs. There's a few pots of basil or rosemary, and you can buy packets and you can buy dried, but you can also maybe buy these plant pots. And I don't know actually what project, like agency project I was working on at the time. But anyway, I was looking at these plants and I was kind of like, wow, there's only a few. And there's so many plants out there. And surely there's loads of herbs that we've maybe forgotten about or that aren't as cool or trendy or commercial. And so I started digging around on Wikipedia and, Google, and getting lost down a bit of a rabbit hole on botanicals and botanical history. And it was because of a Wikipedia link that I found this copy of The Art of Distillation. I found the PDF. If you're listening, Google The Art of Distillation PDF and you will find exactly what I found. Someone had scanned it in. And I was initially looking at all these different herbs and spices. There are 200 mentioned in the book. Then I started to see distillation drawings. I started to read recipes, and I got sucked in. And I was like, well, I grow herbs in my garden. And I know I've seen these copper still things before. Let me get on the internet. And so I bought a little 2.5 liter still, and I started using mint and rosemary from the garden. And I tried out distilling them. And I had no idea what I was doing. But the process of taking a plant and making a liquid that smells and tastes like that plant is magic. Like, it is a magical process. And I was absolutely hooked, and I wanted to keep doing it. And this had absolutely nothing to do with drinks. Absolutely nothing to do with Seedlip, nothing to do with non-alc drinks. And gradually, and I think this is common to, all my projects actually, is that they end up taking actually quite a long time to materialize. And I have to go through these sort of layers of, okay, I'm distilling herbs at home, and that's interesting. And I've bought some equipment, and now I'm looking into what other herbs I could grow. And now, a few months later, I'm being served this pink, disgusting mocktail, and I don't think it really fits in, and I don't want to finish it. And then I'm starting to think, hey, my family have been farming for a really long time, and farming's not easy. I wonder if I could maybe use some of our ingredients and diversify. And my dad's in brand design, so maybe I could get to work with him on a project. And like this was all coming together over 8 months, Erica. Very gradually, very slowly. I disagree with the lightning bolt, aha moment. I've never had that with anything that I've done. And so initially it started as, I'm going to do this as a side project. Seedlip's going to be this little thing, and maybe I'm going to have a bit of fun. I'm going to take it to a farmer's market, and maybe it'll be nice, to make some liquid and put it in a bottle and see what people think. And that then morphed into Life Savings, go full time on it, get literally Seedlip's crest tattooed on my arm, and dedicate all my time and energy, over a 2-year period to going, I need to make this happen. I can't let this down now. And I'm not one of those stories where I just had an idea or something happened and then I went and did it. That's not my experience.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to me because I think, it seems like you were actually, once you probably got to a certain point in the idea and you realize, like, okay, this could be a product. I loved this story that I heard that you actually very methodically, and like I love the data driven side of how businesses are built, and I was so excited to hear this story that you actually looked up and researched 500 of the top accounts in the UK, like the best Michelin starred restaurants, best bars, and you actually called them up under the guise of, hey, I want to bring a friend in. It's my birthday and she's pregnant. Like, do you have some sort of, non-alcoholic option? And so you did this layer of research where people then said, no, we don't have any options, or maybe we have like a juice, cocktail, as was common at the time. And, it was interesting to me that you heard that they didn't have any sort of suitable non-alcoholic, adult alternative beverages. We've come to know them now. But, you saw that really as an opportunity, like as a huge white space where some people might have said like, oh, there's no use case here because no one is actually doing this. So like, it's probably better to go do something else. Like you saw that as an opportunity. Like, tell me, is that just how you're built? I mean, what is the sort of process that, where some people might see roadblocks, you actually see an opportunity?
Yeah, that is a really good question. And I did that, and it did tell me everything, and it cost me nothing, but it told me absolutely everything I needed to know. Which was, if you were not drinking alcohol for whatever reason and going to the best of the best hospitality venues in the UK, you were being shortchanged and you were not getting a great option. So I think this is common to Seedlip and to Sylva. I don't, and this is me being really honest, I don't really care about drinking these drinks. I am not doing these projects so that I can drink these drinks. I don't drink Seedlip. I don't drink Sylva. I don't use Seasn. I don't care about drinking cocktails and non-alc cocktails. It's not for me. What I really care about is creating win-wins. And the win-win and the deal that I make with myself, with Seedlip, with Sylva, with anything that I'm making, is that it's a project that absolutely feeds and nourishes this insatiable curiosity that I have to taste things and understand things and put things together in interesting ways. But the only way I get to keep doing that is if I make something that people enjoy and that meets a need in their lives. So I don't, don't get me wrong. I've been very fortunate to travel the world and go to eat and drink in some of the most incredible venues around the world. And of course, I want to try people's Seedlip cocktail. Of course I do. Of course. But I don't have bottles at home. I'm not going to a party or an event and taking bottles with me. I'm not, when friends and family, this is probably a dreadful thing, all dreadful things to say, Erica, but when people come over to my house, that's rare because I'm not massively social. I'm not kind of playing bartender. I'm not kind of going, hey, check out this, nice new silver highball that I've made. But I really care about our customers, right? And I really care that I can have direct, I'm in direct email feedback with people who are buying Sylva at the moment. We've just launched it. It's new. I've got a direct relationship with our customers. I'm interested in why they bought it. I'm interested in what they think about it. I want to make the best possible, delicious tasting liquids, but I'm not making them for me to drink. And I think I'm really clear about that. And that, I think, helps me, hopefully make better liquids.
I mean, it's fascinating because I think, what I hear is that you're voicing that it's really about the creative generative process and creating a framework in which that you can make more of these types of projects. And so I think that probably, we'll get to Pollen Projects in a minute, but I do want to just say, okay, so we know Seedlip, it achieves product market fit pretty quickly, so it launches in 2015. So, it's before long being carried in dozens of countries. Was there a moment or sort of an event that happened that you knew this product had achieved product market fit?
Short answer, no. Um, I think I'm driven by a fear of failure, right? And so I'm constantly either wanting to close the projects that I'm working on or terrified that they're going to fail and crumble. And and what that does is that keeps me hopefully incredibly grounded. I'm incredibly sort of practical and fact based. And so I don't know. I was never done with Seedlip. I was never, we sold the majority of it to Diageo after 3.5 years. And that's a really short amount of time. It's kind of half the industry standard, right? But we doubled the industry volume standard of threshold of usually where brands are acquired at. So it was an incredibly fast and hectic and stressful and exhilarating and amazing and all the rest of it journey. And obviously I'm still involved and I'm still a shareholder. But I don't know, there were a series of moments, and I'm seeing this again with Sylva. There are what I would call clues, and there are bits where if you're really tuned in to what's going on across and within your business, you'll be able to spot these signs and these signals. And Emma Wykes, who's my co-founder with Pollen Projects, who was my COO with Seedlip, we've become, I think, quite good at spotting those signals. And all we needed to do with Seedlip was we cracked a code, and we cracked a code based on a theory, based on no evidence, right? So we got to this code of if we start at the top and we get the best people saying that Seedlip's great, and I'm being very simplistic here, and we do that in the on-trade, in the on-premise, and we have the right partners and events and retailers that all add up to this is really credible and should be taken seriously and is really delicious and hits a spot, then we can mirror that in any market in the world, because there are, it's, I guess, why we did partnerships with world's 50 best restaurants, world's 50 best bars, the Michelin Guide. There are these top kind of hospitality tastemakers, for want of a better phrase, all over the world. And we only focused on an audience of 1,000 people. There were only 1,000 people that mattered with Seedlip. And that was really the global drinks kind of, I guess, bartenders, chefs, journalists, key people within the drinks industry. There were only 1,000 of those people. And so it was very much a city approach, very much a top-down model. And then we had some fun. We sold lots of Seedlip in garden centers.
Interesting.
Because we wanted to, we were very, very important to us was nature and being a nature company. And so, how could we test and find a different audience that cared about the natural world? Well, posh garden centers and posh farm shops, and designing gardens for the world's, biggest flower show, which we did, 2 years in a row. Yeah, these were the bits and bobs that we were doing that were testing how we could differentiate, cut through, and find the right audience.
Yeah. All right. So that definitely takes us up to Pollen Projects. So how would you describe this new company and the types of products that you're creating?
Yeah. So sold the majority of Seedlip summer of 2019. Then I took a little bit of time off. Then I, worked very closely with Diageo on the integration, and obviously still involved, but it gave me a bit more freedom and a bit more time to start thinking what next? And non-alc is still very young, and most of the, I reckon there's over 1,000 brands now in the non-alc space. I would hazard a guess that 85% of them, maybe even 90%, have launched really since COVID. So what you've got is a incredibly, a fast-growing, exciting space with loads of great demand happening globally, happening all at the same time, with very young businesses in it, and therefore a full spectrum of quality and great brands and poorly executed brands. Some experience, not a lot of experience, some investment, not a lot of investment. And so it's a pretty chaotic time. But as far as I was concerned, I literally feel like it and I are just getting started, and there's more to do. And so Pollen Projects was set up, I guess, as a vehicle to look at different projects. And it was great listening to Elwin talking about his model. He's way better at doing this than I am, but how he balances doing multiple projects. And I think we have a similar philosophy with Pollen Projects. We launched Seasn cocktail bitters probably about 15 months ago. And that is a project I started working on in 2017. So I started in my garage working on how could we make some non-alc bitters that delivered on the same kind of viscosity and application as alcoholic cocktail bitters, but massively simplified the category and looked at it through a consumer lens and made it more simple. So that's what we've done with Seasn, and Seasn is now, it's in loads of great places in the UK. We've got started in New York, Austin, Chicago, Hong Kong. This is where all of our Seedlip relationships really come to bear, because we're working with lots of the same distributors and our network. But really the message that we are actually getting even closer to now and clarifying, because we're kind of learning on the fly, obviously being a small company, is we just need to get people to season their soda. And we've only got 2 products. One's light, one's dark. It fits a whole spectrum of different fizzy drinks, and whether that's mixers or flavored sodas or plain soda. But really, it's a consumer opportunity to get people to very easily and quickly deliver huge amounts of flavor and complexity in just 3 dashes, without having to get into the history of cocktail bitters, without having to do too much, heavy education. So that's an exciting one. And look, Amazon in the US does $25 million a year in cocktail bitters.
Oh wow, yeah.
Angostura is a $300 million turnover business. So there's an interesting niche to kind of play into. So that's our little cocktail bitters brand. And then my real, if you thought I was sort of obsessed with plants and the 47,000 edible plants, I am 10 times as obsessed with trees and the 73,000 tree species we have on this planet that, who knew, are absolutely jam-packed full of flavor. And all we know is American oak. And all we know really is what happens when you put alcohol in a barrel. And we know a lot about that. And there's loads of amazing businesses and very clever people. But 90% of the barrels in the world are made of American oak. And that's 100 years to create 2 barrels when you take a 100-year-old oak tree. So we've taken a slightly different approach, I guess, in terms of there is amazing amount of flavor in trees. And when you don't have to make a barrel, you can use a load more different types of trees. And so we've built a distillery and a maturation laboratory in a forest in the UK, and we're distilling grain, and we are taking trees from our forest, and we are harvesting them rather than chopping trees down. So we're taking branches, we're taking bits of wood, and using all kinds of techniques from roasting and smoking and toasting and chipping, and oxygen and pressure and ultrasound to mature these liquids and extract the flavor, color, and the character from these woods. And I started working on this project before Seedlip, with a project in the US. It's been a long time coming. We've made our first sort of 2 releases. The feedback, is mega. We get some people telling me that we're making wood juice or not understanding what we're doing, and that's fine. But it reminds me of the early days of Seedlip and this frontier that there is of both flavor, but also being able to sip a non-alcoholic spirit neat and slow down and take a moment. I'm really excited about. I'm so excited about this opportunity, both, and I told you before that I'm not interested in people in drinking these products myself. This just feels like, for the industry, there's a whole new frontier of flavor to look at.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it is really fascinating. I wanted to hear more about the first 2 expressions that you've released and how you came to decide on those as the first releases.
Yeah, so we have, very similar to Seedlip in that with 47,000 edible plants and a approach that is about innovation, not imitation, the opportunities and the combinations are infinite. And so what my other, I guess, muscle that I've tried to build, or the skill that I really need to have, that I think is relevant to anybody's business, is you can do anything, right? We can do anything. We can basically put whatever plants together, whatever trees together. And the only really important question is, but what should we do? And so this is this sort of in and out process of going wide and then being ruthless, going wide and then being ruthless, and being able to not aim for perfection, but being able to make decisions and be decisive. And clarity and communication have been massively important pieces of that puzzle, I guess. So with the first 2 releases, Paduk was our first release. That's this incredible red West African tree. And the bark is this sort of gleaming red color. It smells like paprika and kind of sea salt and seaweed, and extracts with loads of chocolate and vanilla. It's amazing. And as soon as we have a great supplier of that sources it properly, and as soon as we extracted that, we chose to build a whole release around that wood. It was just so incredible. We don't use any caramel. We don't use any colors or anything in our liquids. So Sylva Paduk, that I know I'm describing it now, people can't buy it because it's not available anymore because it's sold out. But we built the liquid around that and around rye. So a malted rye and an unmalted rye distillate. There is not a scientific process, Erica, in deciding what woods to work with. And I think there's so many ways in to create a liquid. Paduk centered around this incredible wood that we'd discovered. And so we built the profile around that, but we used red oak from our forest, and we used X Buffalo Trace, X Scotch, organic single malt, whiskey staves, and we used olive wood as well. That gave this beautiful. I mean, olive wood extracts and tastes literally like olive oil. It's wonderful. And we wanted to launch something and see. And so this is not a story of, I spent 5 years working on this liquid. No, I've spent a long time working on the process of how you make these liquids. But that release, we probably worked on for about 6 months as an actual liquid development project. We also started working on our second release, which was much closer to home. And I wanted to celebrate this sort of transition from a forest's dormancy during the winter, when everything kind of calms down and slows down, right through to spring when everything suddenly becomes alive. And so, yeah, we chose 3 native British species: silver birch, hazel, and oak. And we have veteran oak trees here at the distillery. So that means they're over 200 years old. And we wanted to deliver a more vibrant, brighter profile on a base of unmalted rye. So we wanted to kind of keep that pepperiness and kind of greenness that comes from the rye. And yeah, that one's just gone live. And again, the feedback so far seems to be really great. We've chosen to sort of build this live, and the more we learn, the more questions I have and the less I know. But there are so many variables with a tree. And this is stuff that I'm sure 99.9% of people are probably not thinking about. But I'm thinking about, how old is the tree? Where is the tree? Which part of the tree are we going to use? Does the tree taste differently in spring versus summer versus winter versus autumn? How should I process the tree? What should the moisture content be in the bark and in the wood of the tree? How long should I roast it for? How long should I process? How big should I chip it? How small should I chip it? What should the right blend between the different woods be? What pressure should I put these wood under? Et cetera, et cetera. Like, there are so many variables. How much tannin content is there in this particular wood, and what will that? Anyway, loads and loads of variables. But the simple thing is, if you extract plum wood or apple wood, you are going to get the taste of plums and apples. We extracted our plum wood from our orchard here, and I was immediately and instantly taken back to being an 8-year-old boy selling the plums from our orchard at home to people in the village. Instantly, immediately taken back there. So yeah, we're right at the beginning, Erica. We're building our next distillery in upstate New York, which will be opening this summer. And I'm very keen that Sylva as a brand is global and local.
Yeah, yeah.
There are trees and grain all over the world. And yeah, I can't wait to be making liquids in the US, for the US, from the US.
I mean, yeah, that's such a fascinating new sort of twist on, the concept of terroir, bringing it to spirits in a way that's never been done before. Totally fascinating. I'm wondering, will the Sylva brand be entirely focused on sort of, expressions that are meant to be sipped neat? Is that kind of the key focus there?
Yeah. So one of my slight bugbears about the non-alc industry, and my absolute, I guess, loves and admirations about the great craft spirits and great spirits brands, has been this, we make this kind of product, we make whiskey, and that's what we make. Non-alc has has been in danger, I think, of trying to make too many things across too many categories. And all you risk is if you're focused on serve an occasion, it's really difficult to communicate. 1 minute we're a rum, 1 minute we're a whiskey, 1 minute we're gin, 1 minute we're XXX. That's really difficult. That's too much for people to get their heads around. And I come from the school of like stand for one thing, which is what Seedlip did and what Sylva's going to do. So we're only ever going to make dark things. We're only ever going to make things that you can sip neat. You can mix them, sure, make a highball, make an old-fashioned style drink, no problem. But our resolute, ruthless focus is that we're making drinks that you can sip neat.
So we have Paduk and we have Hazel as the first two expressions. How, people in the US, probably most people will not have been able to try these products yet. So how would you describe the sipping experience? Like, does it have characteristics of, heavier viscosity or more weight to it that that a lot like that you would find in cognac or whiskeys? Like, how can we describe for an American audience what these products sip like?
Yeah, very, very good question. Two things to say on it. Number one, I don't drink alcohol. And so I'm not trying to make these taste like anything that I've tasted. There's no reference point. There is no, we're not trying to copy or imitate something that already exists but without alcohol. That's really important. But the characteristics, from my perspective, of what make great dark spirits are these. You can sip them. They are dark in color or golden, or they're not clear. They're probably made at a distillery. They're probably, if they're really great and growing, sort of premium, super premium, of high quality. They definitely will be distilling grain of some sort. They will have a maturation process, and they will celebrate their people, their process, the product, the provenance. And so Sylva is absolutely of that camp. In terms of taste, we've worked really, really hard on basically not making liquids that are thin, that are watery. There's no chili, there's no capsicum added to these liquids to make your mouth burn. What there is I'm more focused on the trigeminal aspect of an alcohol impression, which means it's not about your mouth. It's about your throat, your chest, behind the back of your head, and behind your eyes. And so what these liquids do is they build, and there is warmth. It's not a burn, but it's warmth. And there is body, and there's length, and they're big aromatics on the nose. I mean, Paduk, for example, was kind of chocolates, and it was quite sweet toffees and stewed fruits. Hazel is much woodier, much drier, quite citrusy, but that like fresh cut wood with all the winter sort of forest floor throughout the middle. And then this really lovely long, finish. And we're doing that partly because of the wood and the grain, partly because of the way that we process them, partly because we're doing things that other people aren't doing, or using things that other people haven't used in non-alc. To try and to try and show people what's possible.
Yeah, definitely. So, let's get to the operational side a little bit, because, I was looking at your LinkedIn, and you've been very transparent about the process of building a new startup, right? A new liquid startup here. And, you've talked about, setbacks that you've had with packaging issues, labeling, fulfillment, what have been the biggest challenges, and the biggest lessons that you've learned from facing those challenges in this new startup setting?
I mean, for anyone like startups, it's hard. It's so hard, and quite a large amount of the time, I ask myself, like, why I do this to myself, right? It's hard, and I definitely, there are some things that are easier because this is second time around, but most of that is how the industry works, right? Most of that is what I would call the business basics of the drinks industry. How do distributors work? How do value chains work? What kind of margins do people want to make? Who's who in the industry? Who's good? Who's not? Who are the right suppliers? Who are the right bars, retailers? What's the jargon? What do the acronyms mean? What does an FSDU stand for? All that kind of stuff that I had to learn for the first time. I'm not having to learn again. And so that's helpful, right? That's stuff I don't have to spend energy on time on. And we have a small team of experts who also understand all of that as well, which makes things move faster. But that doesn't mean that I'm not making loads of mistakes. And I do make lots of mistakes. And most of the time, I'm okay with that. Because what I do and what I encourage my team to do is to commit to stuff and to own stuff and to take responsibility for stuff. There's no blame within our business. There's no blame within our culture. I get more annoyed. I get most annoyed with my team if they don't take holidays and they don't fully commit to something. And so when you fully commit to something of and whether that's, I don't know, the size of the label or the outer packaging or some of those like simple things or a message, there's no going back because you committed to it. And sometimes that goes wrong. Sometimes that isn't the best thing. And that's okay. I'd much rather people commit to stuff and own it and go for it than half-heartedly do it or try and blame other people or not take responsibility for it. So, I have, I've talked about, and, I made loads of mistakes with Seedlip too. Most of the mistakes, though, they're not kind of life or death. 99.9% of them are kind of, you can do something about it and you can make it better. And part of the reason why we're doing Sylva the way that we're doing it is because no one's done it before. And so that means there's not a body of knowledge. So we have to make mistakes because we have to try stuff and we have to fail and we have to learn and we have to prove. I'm not going to bore you, but you see the products that we've released, but beneath that are a whole load of different research projects that we're doing because we do not know all the answers. I cannot launch at the moment. I can't launch a product that can be all year round and like made in mass scale. I can't do that, and that's okay. We'll get there. But we need to do all the learning first. And it's a little bit like with Seedlip, where we had to do all the jobs for the category. We had to be like master educator, and we had to educate everybody, the consumer, the trade, the buyers, etc. We had to do all of that. And we had to talk about Seedlip, and we had to get people to do trial and sampling, and we had to do every single job of the category. And so we're doing every job at the moment of, I guess, how do you get amazing flavor from trees and make that into dark non-alcoholic spirits? We're doing all those jobs at the moment as well, which feels like an absolute privilege, to be honest, some of the time. Some of the time, it's a bit of a head scratcher. But I think there could be more that people could do to share the mistakes that they make. And And my only goal is to not make the same mistake twice. That's fine. It's not about not making mistakes.
Right. And I think that transparency also helps, other entrepreneurs realize, like, look, this is not, you're not going to make all the right choices the first time. This is a learning curve. There's always going to be a learning curve. I mean, it sounds like, with this new project of building Sylva into essentially another fresh white space within the non-alcoholic category, it's just there's the challenges of entirely new processes of behavior change, of helping trade, consumers, etc., understand sipping non-alcoholic spirit.
Yep.
And then I hear what you're saying about like constantly wanting to burn the thing down because like, is there, will this thing work? And the fear of all this. And you had mentioned something intriguing though around clues, that you see these clues or these signs that it's actually working. And can you share what some of those are?
Yeah, sure. So a few signs to me on Sylva are, let's think, when people start sending me randomly photos of trees. And that sounds ridiculous, right? But all I want people to do is sort of see trees and think Sylva. That's the only kind of goal. I need to make the mental connection in people's heads. And so when people are like on holiday or they're sending me photos of trees, I think that's a really good sign, as random as that is. The second sign is that really amazing venues want to send us their wood. And that's a really interesting sign when they are interested in exploring what kind of customer releases or bespoke editions, because they've got beautiful hotels with lots of forests and woodland. That's a really good sign. It's a really great sign when a very high-end gifting company have come across Sylva and are interested in exploring how much of an amazing gift Sylva makes. That's another really good sign. It's a really good sign when, and it wasn't me, but when Stuart, who looks after all our kind of sales and advocacy, is at Blue Hill and at Aviary and tasting, with their teams, and they're absolutely blown away. Or he's with, the guys at the Alchemist in Copenhagen, and Sylva's now in 3 Michelin star restaurants in the UK, and Alchemist and Aviary, Blue Hill. These people are really amazing. Or it's really amazing when Heston Blumenthal tells me that Sylva's doing 6 bottles a week in the Fat Duck, and the Fat Duck's a 14 cover restaurant. Like, it's tiny. So yeah, these are like, but I have a different challenge with Sylva than with Seedlip, in that with Seedlip, we were able to scale production quickly. We went from being able to make 1,000 bottle batches to within 3-4 months making 7,000 bottle batches. And we could scale that supply chain. It wasn't owned. We could scale that supply quite quickly. Sylva, we've made it hard for ourselves. We're making it ourselves. And so, and that's important. But we have to learn more about our liquid, and we've got to prove our production process. And so, it's another reason why having these multiple distilleries is another way in which we can learn more faster and be able to, I guess, expand our business faster by, tackling another market, so that we're sort of doubling the amount of learning, if that makes sense. So I am. There aren't many, I guess, there aren't many brands and businesses in the drink space that decide pretty much, at launch that they're going to open another distillery, 6 months later. And we don't have any of the sort of geographical restrictions and kind of, legacy legislation that cognac does, or Scotch, for example. But
Yeah.
still, that's quite a bold move. Yeah.
Definitely. And I think, it's interesting because, I think it sounds like you're still at the experimental phase where you don't exactly know what the supply chain will look like for sourcing all of that wood, right? Or the volumes of wood that might be needed to produce, like X volume of wood is needed to produce Y volume of liquid. So that's a fascinating place to be in. Well, I know we have to wrap up, but I want to ask a couple more questions. So, what advice would you have for an entrepreneur who's trying to build a non-alcoholic brand today?
I think if you do not have a incredibly high quality liquid and a brand that has been designed with relevance and meaning and salience to a audience, then you shouldn't be doing what you're doing. I do think they sound really obvious of like, have a great product and have a great brand. But that's not the case in the non-alc category. There aren't loads and loads of amazing brands that have been really clear on serve an occasion with a really high quality liquid, that aren't trying to be everything to everyone. And I do think this is about making sacrifices. And in non-alc now, I do believe it is way more important what you are not going to do than what you are going to do. And so doing less actually, but making more of what you do and getting to being able to repeat something is really important, is really, really important. And that means being curious. It means trying the right things, but it also means having some nous, I guess, or some intuition on, hey, this is working. Like I know, and I knew literally as we were doing Sylva's first event, which was a feast in the forest, that you had to pay for, that wasn't our own event. But as soon as I got the initial feedback, we're now trying to do that 100 times. It was so good. It was such a perfect first experience for Sylva, in the woods, with friends, with food, beautiful occasion. It was a great first experience for Sylva. Great. How are we doing that 100 times is then the question. So yeah, having a great liquid, having a great brand, deciding what you're not going to do and what you're not going to be and how you're not going to talk and who you're not going to talk to, is actually more important to understand and know than what you are. And often it's easier for people actually to kind of go, oh, we're not like that, and we're not going to do this, and we don't want to be like that. That's really good. Don't worry about trying to figure out what you are going to do, but being really clear on what you're not going to be and what you're not going to do, actually, I think is the best way to write briefs, in my experience.
Nice. All right. Well, our last question is, a drinks entrepreneur asks you for a book, could be a movie, online class, someone to follow on LinkedIn. Who do you recommend to provide insight?
I'm going to be really cheeky and say three things. One is David Hyatt. He's the founder of a jeans company, and he talks about ideas, and he's absolutely brilliant, massive inspiration to me. The second one is a copywriter from the ad industry from the 80s. He's one of my heroes. He's a man called Dave Trott, as he goes by. And he's a storyteller, and he writes short stories about advertising and marketing and basically about doing things differently. He's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I've read all his books. He's an amazing man. The third thing, and there's a sort of general theme here, is a book by M&C Saatchi called Brutal Simplicity of Thought. And effectively, you don't even need to buy the book. It's a very short book, but it's the idea that actually it takes a lot of work to make something simple. And when you do make something simple, it travels and made an idea, a product, whatever. Most people don't bother to do that work to make it simple. And I guess when I first read that book and came across that idea, I've stuck to it and committed to it in everything that I do, of like, do the work, do the work, do the work, and you can make it. You've got to make it simple, because people do not care about drinks brands. They do not walk around thinking about your drink. They don't go out to drink your drink. You're literally trying to occupy this tiniest little bit of memory structure in their brain for a split second, when people are bombarded with loads of other information and loads of other brands and drinks and worries and all the rest of it. And so you've got to make it really, really simple. You've got to make it so simple you kind of think it's too simple. It doesn't mean it's dumbed down, but it needs to be really simple. All we did with Seedlip, Erica, to finish was basically do three things over and over again. Firstly was be a nature company that makes drinks, and nature, that piece, informed us internally from a culture perspective and a hiring perspective, and externally from a marketing lens. We told people again and again and again that Seedlip was what to drink when you're not drinking, again and again and again. And everything we did ended up in a Seedlip and tonic. So occasion and serve, purpose, occasion and serve, really, really important. We're doing exactly the same with Sylva, exactly the same with Seasn, to try and make them incredibly simple.
Yeah. I mean, as they say in journalism, it is 10 times as hard to write short than long. So that sounds like the exact same thinking there. Well, Ben, it's been such a pleasure having you on the business of drinks. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insights about the founder's journey. I think so many listeners will get huge benefit from listening to your thoughts.
I don't know if people want to be inside my head, but yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Welcome back to Last Call. Today, I'm here with Isamu Kamide, who is co-founder of the LA-based Wonderwork House of Fermentation. You might remember him from episode 36 last fall, where we talked about his brand as being one of the more innovative wine brands that we've talked about. You know, Wonderwork has created some new products that have been real hits with Gen Z and millennial audiences, including Lightwork, which is a line of 7% alcohol sparkling wines that are flavored with yuzu, hibiscus, and lemons. And those have been a huge hit. I see them on the retail shelves in my shop down the street. And then also one of the ones I love is Marinara. It's a lively red with a label that shows a big bowl of pasta on it. So you know this is what you're supposed to eat with what you've purchased to drink. And that's been really an interesting place for this brand to play in, essentially trying to engage with younger consumers and helping them understand where products fit into their lives. They've had a ton of success, and I wanted to invite Isamu on again today to give us an update. So Isamu, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me again.
Yay. So give me an update. What's been happening since we talked last fall?
Since last fall, we've added about 4 new markets, 4 new states. We're working on adding another 2, so maybe this year we'll bring the total up to 6. The tariffs and everything have sort of thrown everybody for a loop when it comes to planning. But for us, we're up 30% versus prior period last year, which is really great to see, and that's really buoyed by our growing partnership with Whole Foods. So we're launching this spring one of our SKUs, Big Orange, which is a 1 liter orange wine, in about 176 Whole Foods nationwide, and looking to expand that going forward next year. We started pitching a couple other wines, hopefully to be accepted in the September reset. But we think expanding what we're trying to do into grocery retail is going to be like a big big push for us in the future, and also really help get the brand out there and get the products out there on more shelves in front of more consumers. So that's, we're eyeing going over $1 million this year. We're going to sort of trim down our portfolio, dial in a couple things. We like to experiment and see what works, and things that work, we scale up as fast as we can, vintage to vintage. And light work was one of those. We took a shot in the dark and thought, okay, low ABV, flavored. A lot of wine people looked at it with, a puzzled look, like, is this wine? What is this? Some people got it instantly. One of the things we noticed was variation and receptivity to flavor across the country. So we have a pink lemonade flavor that tastes and looks like pink lemonade, and not surprisingly, very successful in the Southeast and the Northeast. Where people maybe have grown up with that Crystal Light, that sort of nostalgic, beverage in the summertime or something like this. But also yuzu being such a popular flavor right now, across the board, universal interest in that. And so we're going to keep experimenting on, innovations in wine, and making sure that, what we're able to do, we're able to scale, we're able to dial in the production, and we're able to get in front of more people.
Yeah. And, I think one of the most interesting things to me about Wonderwork is really that the company almost functions in its branding and its marketing like a CPG product, as opposed to a traditional wine product. So tell me about that philosophy and how that's worked for you.
Well, I have a CPG background, having worked at Nestle for a while, and then some other companies. But I feel like when we approached wine, we initially started to play the game as everybody else has played it for probably the last 15 to 20 years, which was, a smaller footprint, smaller case volume, more artistic, more craftsmanship oriented. But we didn't really see the opportunity there. So we started to play around more. And when we started to play around more, we started to basically, in the world of CPG, right, is like, listen to the consumer. So instead of being, obsessed with being the craftsman and the winemaker, and sharing our art with the world, which we think a lot of people have the right to do, for us, it was, what does the consumer want? What are they looking for? What are we missing in what we're making, and how we're talking about things, how we're designing things. So we started to take that approach, and it's worked out really well for us. And then we started to think even a little bit more. If you go back in time, right, in the 70s and 80s, there were national TV ads for wine brands. Riunides, Bartles and James. Wine was a CPG product in the past, just as it was with beer and spirits. But we've completely ceded the ground to other beverages and to beer and spirits as a sort of national product that people can, or national beverage or something like this, that people can enjoy. We've really became almost too inverted. It's almost too obsessed with just wine and the wine world and Psalms and this sort of stuff. And we forgot the consumer. So I think for our approach, it's, how do we talk about wine in a new way? How do we talk about it in a way that's approachable? So we just launched another 1 liter SKU called Big Juicy. And on the front of that, instead of talking about appellation or AVAs or tasting notes, when we were kicking it around, we're like, when was the last time anybody under the age of, anybody, 25, 30, 35-year-old knows what a red currant looks like and tastes like, but
Sure.
that's a phrase in wine that we toss around all the time as a tasting note. So I just said, let's just say, big, bursting with fruity flavor, the same language used in candy or something like this, because it's a really young, fresh, low alcohol, fruity wine. And it's, if somebody picks that up and they're not familiar with wine, they go, bursting with fruity flavor. Maybe I'll like this.
Yeah, exactly.
I like Skittles and I like all this other stuff. So just taking that sort of approach is, been really beneficial to us, and helped us sort of, spread our wings and widen the consumer base a little bit.
Yeah. And, if our listeners are interested in kind of seeing your approach in action, are there particular products or, even social media campaigns that you would recommend that they look at to really start to understand how you're putting this into practice with some tangible examples?
Yeah, I mean, go to our social media. Our Instagram is, we do recaps of all the events that we do, whether we're doing events in New York or San Francisco. We just did the Just Like Heaven Festival in LA with Golden Voice, where we had our own sort of wine cart and we were, showcasing 2 new releases to the audience there. I mean, this is the whole place is just full of 25 to 45-year-olds going to see some of the best bands in indie pop. And like that sort of approach for us is what's really working, which is, think about the consumer, go to where they are, activate where they are, showcase what you have. Liquid to lips always works really well. But that's sort of where we do a lot of our recaps online and things like this. But we're starting to expand that direction a little bit more. We've been really focused on production and inventory and meeting demand. And now I think we're going to start shifting gears more into, marketing and this sort of stuff.
Amazing. Well, I am so excited to continue following along with your successes. I think that these are some really actionable insights, and I encourage everyone to go to your social media account and to website. Give us the website URL.
www.wonderworkla.com.
Great. And that's all the time that we have today. But Isamu, thank you so much for coming on to share these insights and give us an update. And a little note that we always do at the end of our episode. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. Please follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you're listening, and tap the notification button so you'll be the first to know when a new episode drops. And please help us spread the word. Click the star ratings, share on social. All of these things really do help us find new listeners. Finally, if there's something that you'd like us to cover on the podcast, tell us. We're at podcast@businessofdrinks.com, or you can reach out via Instagram or LinkedIn. We want to hear from you, and we really do respond to messages. So Isamu, thank you again for coming on.
Thank you for having me.